In a house that will be occupied by a family who just moved in, there's a father named Brian, a mother named Kira, their daughter named Ellie, and Ellie's younger brother named Steven. Brian and Kira are the heads of a company in the social media field, especially for vloggers and influencers, and they just launched a new app made by their company. From their income as bosses, they were able to buy this beautiful house with the goal of making their children happy. The house stands grandly, surrounded by a forest, and there are still many items left inside by the previous owner. Steven feels happy to see their new house, but not Ellie, who says the house looks really ugly. Inside, Ellie asks why there's still creepy paintings and old stuff lying around. Her mother answers that all of those things are included with the house they bought, and they'll throw some of them away later. Even though some of the items left behind are good, like a TV and a sofa, Ellie still doesn't like the house. Meanwhile, her father says he is very happy because there's a room filled with books, just like he always wished when he was a kid. They then discover a door leading to the basement, and out of curiosity, they decide to check it out. Down there, the room looks dirty and there's nothing interesting to examine. They just need to remember that if the power goes out, they need to switch it back on using the breaker down there. Just before Ellie gets out of the basement, suddenly the door shuts by itself, and strangely, it can't be opened. Ellie becomes terrified after hearing creepy noises and feeling a gust of wind from below. In the middle of trying to get her daughter out, Kira notices there's actually a key on the side of the door, and finally, Ellie is freed. Because of this incident, she dislikes the house even more and thinks it's weird. It is revealed that Ellie is an anarchist. She doesn't like the government or laws, and she even says she is an atheist. So when her mother asks her about the platform app their company just created, Ellie says she doesn't like that kind of thing. Her mother actually wants to change her daughter's perspective on anarchism by showing her the fun things modern girls enjoy, but Ellie instead says she hates her mother's job, not wanting to argue about it. Her mother then asks her to look after her little brother while she and Brian have to go to the office tonight for a major project. At night, Ellie is on a phone call with her boyfriend, who is also part of her anarchist group. But the call is suddenly interrupted when a door behind her opens by itself, and someone with a goat's skull head suddenly appears. Turns out, it's just her brother messing around, and she threatens to give him back for it. A moment later, she asks him where he got the skull from, and he says he found it in a small room. There, they discover a gramophone, and her brother says that according to his friend, the house belonged to a witch who made a deal with the devil. Ellie casually responds with, yeah, and they play a vinyl record that's already on the gramophone. They hear the voice of a man talking about math. The man then counts from 1 to 6 before Ellie turns it off, thinking it's weird. Ellie enjoys watching horror movies, but while she's watching one, she doesn't realize that something is coming from behind the basement door. But something causes all the lights to go out, including the TV. She immediately reports this to her mother, and her mother tells her to go down to the basement to turn the power back on using the switch. But since she already experienced a creepy event yesterday, Ellie of course doesn't want to go down again. However, her mother asks her to do it for her little brother and promises to stay on the phone with her the whole time. Ellie finally agrees and starts walking to the basement. As soon as she enters, she sees how dark it is and admits she feels scared. Her mother says she knows there are only 10 steps down there and suggests Ellie count the steps as she walks down to distract her from the fear. Ellie starts counting as she goes down the stairs. But when she reaches the 9th step, something covers her eyes and possesses her. Even though she has reached the 10th step, Ellie continues counting, step 11, 12, 13, and so on. This makes her mother confused, so she and her husband immediately return home and go straight to the basement. After switching the power back on, they find that Ellie has disappeared without a trace. Her brother only just finds out about what happened, and they quickly call the police to report their missing daughter. In the end, their search efforts fail, and Brian suspects that Ellie ran away again, which means she must have done it before. But he believes she'll come back in a few days, assuming she's staying at a friend's place. After continuing the search with local residents the next day, their efforts are still in vain, making her mother cry over her daughter's disappearance. A missing person report is posted before she goes to the police station to ask about the progress of the investigation. The officer says they've spoken to her friends, checked the CCTV footage, but unfortunately found no leads. He also says they checked Ellie's social media history and found that she had experienced a lot of bullying, something her mother didn't know about. But from a photo of the house shown by the officer, Kira's suspects that Ellie didn't run away. She strongly believes that something happened in the basement after hearing what sounded like her daughter in trouble. Kira then asks about the phone tracking results, and the officer says her phone was last detected in the basement. Feeling anxious, Kira wants to ask for help from more expert police officers, but the officer replies that the case is not classified as a criminal case. So Kira decides to investigate the house herself. When she arrives home, she sees the word "solve et coagula" written above the front door. She searches for the meaning of the phrase online and becomes confused about what it means. She then asks Steven if he has seen anything strange, and he says he and Ellie once played a vinyl record on the gramophone. Kira then checks Ellie's social media and finds an anarchist symbol tattooed on her leg, along with the words saying she doesn't believe in God. Kira continues her investigation in the basement, using a UV LED light she just bought that looks like a Star Wars sword. There, she finds Roman numerals on each step and a strange mathematical formula, though she doesn't think much of it. Suddenly, she discovers many red-faced drawings. These drawings look like lost human souls, as if being tortured, so Kira decides to ask the officer for help again. After the place is checked by his expert team, the officer says the red drawings are actually paint made from a plant that turns red when lit with UV light. That plant has reportedly existed since the 1950s. So the officer asks if Kira and her husband know about the history of the house. They say they don't, and explain that they bought it at an auction for a cheap price, arguing that they didn't want to miss the opportunity for the sake of their children. That night, while sleeping, Kira is startled when Steven comes to her, saying he just wet the bed. Because of that, her mother helps take care of him before she promises her son that they will find Ellie no matter what happens. Being woken up from her sleep makes Kira unable to sleep again, as she keeps worrying about Ellie. Not long after that, she hears Ellie's voice counting again, starting from 1 and continuing. Kira follows the direction of the voice, which leads her to the basement. There, she accidentally kicks Steven's toy ball. Previously, he played with that ball near the door and didn't realize that it had rolled toward the door when his mother called him. After she kicks it, the ball keeps falling down, as if there's still more stairs below. But when Kira turns on her flashlight, everything looks normal, with only 10 steps visible. As a result, she becomes even more curious about the math formula on the floor, until she ends up staying awake all night, trying to guess the meaning of the 6 symbols she found in her house. After her husband wakes up, Kira asks about the strange symbols, which turn out to be different on every door. Then she tells him about Ellie being bullied by students at her school who didn't like her beliefs, just because she was different. Seeing his wife get emotional, her husband calms her down and becomes more convinced that Ellie ran away because of the bullying, and he feels guilty that they, as her parents, never noticed it. Kira then takes photos of all the symbols to ask her assistant for help in finding out what they mean. During a meeting with her client, Kira can't focus on work because the worry about Ellie keeps haunting her, so she decides to leave. But while she's on her way out, her assistant informs her that the symbols are actually letters from a language he recognizes. When he puts them together in a certain order, he finds out that it spells Leviathan, a kind of sea creature from mythology. After learning this, Kira immediately searches about it online when she gets home and finds out that Leviathan is a giant serpent from hell. She then becomes curious about the gramophone, so she plays it and hears a man's voice reciting a mathematical formula. At the same time, Steven is playing a game, but suddenly he becomes possessed while following the numbers spoken by the mysterious man. When the man counts to 8, Kira notices that her son is also reciting those numbers. So she quickly turns off the device and snaps Steven out of it after he says the number 10. Strangely, he says he doesn't know what just happened to him. He only remembers playing his game. After calming down, Kira becomes curious about a painting of a man named Featherston, with 2 of his fingers pointing upward. So she searches his name online and finds out that Featherston was a famous physicist who went missing along with his family. As she keeps digging, the basement door suddenly swings open on its own again, and it causes a power outage. Kira then hears her daughter's voice calling for help from behind the basement door, but oddly, the door won't open. The key is also missing, which makes Kira panic. She tries to peek through the keyhole to see her daughter, but suddenly a monster's eye appears and stares back at her. Steven, who turns out to have been standing behind her the whole time, says he was just sleeping. But the strange events aren't over. The door opens by itself again, making Kira curious. She picks up the fallen key and puts it back in its place before stepping inside to investigate. Suddenly, the door shuts on its own again, and strangely, it can't be opened. At that moment, Kira becomes even more curious about what's really inside that room. But unfortunately, her phone suddenly falls due to a sudden gust of wind, and strangely, the sound of the phone falling echoes like it dropped very far. Shortly after, she hears the monster's voice, so she begs her son to quickly open the door. But even after using the key, Stephen can't open it. Her husband arrives just in time, and finally, the door opens. Kira then tells him everything that happened, admitting that she felt a strange presence under the stairs, and that her phone disappeared after she accidentally dropped it. She also reveals that she found out about the Featherston family who lived in the house before, how they all vanished, except for the daughter. Because of all that, she believes something is terribly wrong in the basement. However, her husband still doesn't believe any of it and decides to go down himself to find the phone. But when he checks, the phone is really gone, and he only finds a bunch of strange feathers. The next day, Kira goes to a national mathematics university to learn the meaning of the mathematical formula she discovered in the basement. There, she meets a doctor named Remy and asks what the formula means. Remy knows what it is, and when he reads it, he doesn't realize that reciting it causes the lights in the room to briefly flicker. Kira then asks who Featherston is, and Remy says he had a colleague named Irwin, also a physicist who once won a Nobel Prize. Back in the 1940s, Featherston worked together with Irwin until Featherston's son, named Jack, became ill and later disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, his daughter, who also got sick, now lives in a nursing home. To this day, she has never recovered and never speaks about what happened in that house. Remy then strongly suspects that the mathematical formula is actually a representation of another dimension or many dimensions. He admits he's curious and promises to contact Kira again if he finds more useful information. After buying a new phone, Kira doesn't even react when Stephen gets a new drone because she's so deeply immersed in the mystery of this incident. She later receives another call from Remy, who shares new info from his colleague in France. He says the mathematical formula is connected to a branch of math created by an alchemist in the 12th century. The alchemist treated the branch of math as an incomplete spell that generated a unique sequence pointing toward multiple dimensions. He also tells her that the formula had once been carved into a house in Belgium, a very famous house. But one family who lived in that house completely vanished without a trace. With all this information, Kira feels like she finally has a breakthrough in understanding what's happening with this house, and she shares it with her husband. Kira remembers that Featherston called the house Saus, which in Greek means chaos, a void that existed before time, a reference to hell itself. She then shows the math formula on the basement floor, which she strongly believes is a pathway to hell, thinking this might be the only way to find their daughter again. Still, her husband doesn't believe any of it. He assumes Featherston was just a bookworm who got obsessed and started creating weird things. This leads him into an argument, which ends with Kira feeling disappointed. Tired of the mystery, Brian decides to destroy the formula on the floor using a hammer. But they don't realize that Stephen sees someone coming from a small room, and it turns out to be his sister. He screams, which makes his parents immediately rush over, only to find Ellie's fallen phone on the floor. But they also don't realize that the gramophone turns on by itself, and the voice of the man keeps repeating the number 10, 10, and 10, indicating that something evil is ready to come out. On one occasion, together with a police officer, Brian remembers that the owner of the house is an old woman and suspects that she needs to sell the house quickly for her care in a nursing home. So Kira calls the house agent to ask for information about the woman. The agent says her name is Rose Featherston and tells her the location of a nursing home, which makes Kira go there immediately. After her visit is approved by the nursing home staff, Kira finally meets the former owner of the house. She tells her about the problem she's facing now and wants to ask for clarity about the basement. Rose suddenly writes the word Leviathan, which is one of the 7 princes of hell. She admits that her father had brought the prince of hell into the human world until one day her brother Jack got sick, and unfortunately, no science or medical knowledge could help him. She says she believes that mathematics is supposed to be used to understand the universe, to create order out of chaos. But what her father managed to do was bring darkness into the human world, darkness that has existed since before the universe was born. When Kira asks if Ellie is still in the basement, Rose replies that it's not just a basement, but the house of darkness itself. Meanwhile, Brian begins to believe that this is truly a path to hell. So he examines the photos of the symbols on all the doors and feels there is something suspicious. First, he separates all the symbol photos with the pentagon symbol and thinks the triangles could be connected to the pentagon. So he places all the triangles onto the pentagon, and finally, he forms a pentagram. He immediately tells his wife once she arrives home combining the pentagram with the word Leviathan, which eventually leads them to a symbol with a goat's head. This symbol contains 5 letters in its circle, and finally, they discover the figure behind the symbol, Baphomet. Baphomet is a kind of demon worshipped by occultists and the Templar Knights, a kind of gatekeeper or soldier of hell. His fingers also match those in the Featherston painting, where he raises 2 fingers upward along with the words Salve and Coagula, just like on the top of their house door. As a result, Kira concludes that everything they've found is actually designed to surround Baphomet. They then play the gramophone again, which Kira believes is Featherston's voice, purposely recording his mathematical formulas to open the gate to hell. At that moment, Stephen's drone turns on by itself, even though the battery is dead, and flies into the basement. But since the gramophone is playing the numbers again, Stephen becomes possessed once more by the darkness before regaining consciousness and retrieving his drone. However, he doesn't realize that Baphomet has slowly appeared beside him, and Stephen screams. Kira and her husband immediately go down to the basement, but strangely, their son has disappeared. After searching the entire house for him, they finally find him in his small room, where Stephen is already possessed by Baphomet. They take him to a safe place and feel that his body is very hot. So his mother tries to take off his shirt, only to discover the pentagram symbol already marked by Baphomet. Stephen smiles and says he remembers something. He was riding a wild beast with 7 heads and 10 horns before he gets possessed again and starts counting backward from 50. The same fate happens to Brian, who also ends up possessed by Baphomet. That's why Kira closes the basement door. But that doesn't stop her husband from counting, and after he finishes the countdown, he says Baphomet is here. Baphomet bangs on the door repeatedly until he manages to break it open, forcing Kira to hide. Thinking Baphomet has moved away, she gets up, but suddenly Baphomet appears right in front of her. He attacks her, but luckily misses, so she quickly runs to find Ellie, who is in hell. She begins descending the staircase to hell, which turns out to be extremely long, with Baphomet chasing behind her. After managing to hide from him, Kira continues her journey until she finally arrives in the world of hell. There, she finds many people walking around, all of them possessed by demons and being tortured through counting. Some have counted to hundreds of thousands, millions, even billions. At first, Kira feels hopeless because she can't find her daughter. But when she sees the anarchist symbol on a leg, just like Ellie's, Kira finally finds her, who has already counted past 3 million. She grabs Ellie and immediately takes her back to the human world. Just as she's about to close the door, Baphomet comes after them. So Kira hits him with her flashlight until it falls between the door gap, and she has to kick it away to close the door. They continue escaping by climbing the stairs, with Baphomet still chasing them, before Kira finally shuts the basement door. Baphomet keeps banging the door, but Kira tells him he can't enter the human world, and finally, he stops. Kira then brings Brian back to consciousness, and Ellie also comes back to normal, and the whole family reunites again. But just when they plan to leave the house for good, they see Kira's flashlight lying on the ground, just like how it fell earlier, on Baphomet's side. This makes Kira suspicious. When she opens the door, it turns out they're still in hell, with the long staircase in front of them. As a result, Ellie, Stephen, and Brian become possessed again, just like before, starting to count from 0, and Kira also gets possessed. The Cellar movie ends with their house being transformed dimensionally by Baphomet, turning it into a part of hell. And finally, the whole family enters hell. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification so you don't miss the latest recaps. Thanks for watching and wish you good health.